Ever feel like you're doing all the right things, but the scales just aren't cooperating? Or even worse, you lose weight one day only to gain it back the next. If daily weight fluctuations have you feeling defeated, then stick around because in this video, I'm gonna share with you the exact reasons why you see these jump around in weights, especially in a fat loss phase. And I'm gonna give you some practical tips to help minimize this and keep you progressing in the right direction. Welcome to the channel. My name is Ryan. I'm an ex-NRL player, online coach, and natural bodybuilder. And this channel is all about finding the most efficient way to help you lose fat and build muscle. Now, first up, we need to understand why we see these changes in weight from day to day. Now, I can pretty much guarantee you it's got nothing to do with whether you're gaining fat or losing fat, and more to do with these factors that I'm about to talk to you right now. Now, first one up is water retention. Now, this is gonna have probably the most influence over the number that you see on your scale from a day-to-day basis. And carbohydrate intake influences our water retention. Now, when we eat glucose or when we eat carbohydrates, we store that as muscle glycogen. And for us to be able to store muscle glycogen, we need to store 3 mils of water for every gram that we store. Now, muscle glycogen is very important, especially if you are doing resistance training, as majority of that energy is going to come from the stored glycogen within the muscle to try and fuel that session. However, it is going to influence your weight and the number that you see on the scale. Majority of adults can store between 400 to even 700 grams of glycogen, and for every gram is also attached 3 mils of water. So you can see how you can see dramatic changes depending on if you're eating a high carbohydrate diet or a low carbohydrate diet, even though it has nothing to do with your fat stores. Another one is sodium levels. If you eat a high salt meal, you are going to retain more water as your body is always trying to maintain an osmotic balance, especially within your bloodstream. So what your body will do is it will retain more water to try and even out that balance. So as we eat more salt, we retain more water to make sure there's a nice balance between sodium and water. Another one is hydration status. Commonly, when I see people go into a fat loss phase, they'll set a few goals like a calorie deficit, how many times they're gonna work out a week, what their steps are, and they'll also increase their hydration. So go from drinking 1 to 1.5 liters of water today up to 2.5 to 3 liters of water. Now, this is obviously a great thing, and I definitely do support improving your hydration status, but at the same time, it will result in you being a little bit heavier, even though it's got nothing to do with fat loss. Another one is food volume and digestion. Along with improving your hydration status, some people will want to improve or increase their fiber intake, which is something that I definitely support. It's going to make you feel fuller. It is amazing for your health. But the reason why it makes you feel fuller is because it slows digestion time. So food, all the matter that goes through our digestive system is going to be in there for a little bit longer. Plus it is going to pull water into your GI tract as well, which could result in a little bit more higher number on the scales. Another one is meal timing. Say if you usually eat your meals at 7 p.m. and then go to bed an hour or two later, but for some reason you had to stay back late at work, or maybe you had a birthday where you ate late at night, and say you ate at 10 p.m. When you get up the next morning to weigh yourself, you are going to have more food than you otherwise would in your digestive tract, which is going to result in a higher number on the scale. Another one is exercise-induced muscle inflammation. Now, if we are going into a fat loss phase, I generally recommend you guys increasing your resistance training to make sure we're able to maintain or even gain muscle during a fat loss phase. But along with that, we will see some inflammation within the muscle. Completely normal, but it is something to factor in because it will affect the weight that we see or the number we see on the scale. Another one is hormonal fluctuations, especially for our women. Menstrual cycle is going to drastically influence the number that you see on the scale, especially from day to day. You'll generally be heavier, be just before that shedding phase. So having an understanding that your weight will increase and decrease, that has nothing to do with whether you're losing fat or gaining fat, but just purely where you are in your menstrual cycle, is a really, really good understanding to have. Another one is cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Now this can influence how much water we retain, okay? Cortisol has a pretty close relationship with aldosterone and also our antidiuretic hormone. Okay, now these two hormones influence how much water we retain or how much water we excrete. It also has influence over the balance of electrolytes, so things like sodium and potassium. So making sure that if you are going through a stressful period or maybe you're having poor sleep, you're probably going to see a higher number on the scale just because of this water retention, not really to do with fat loss or fat gain. Bowel movements is another one. You'll generally have reduced bowel movements when you go into a fat loss phase. I know for myself that when I'm at the peak of my bulk and I'm eating the most amount of food that I ever do, I go to the toilet 3 times a day. When I go into a fat loss phase, within 1 to 2 weeks, I'm down to going to the toilet twice a day. And then when I get deep into prep, I actually might have some days where I'm only going to the toilet just once per day. So that will influence the number that I see on the scale, because one day I might go to the toilet twice per day, and then the next day I might go to the toilet once, and that's going to have some influence on the day-to-day fluctuation that we see. Sleep quality, stress is ultimately going to influence our cortisol levels, which I spoke about before, which can lead to water retention. Now, some practical takeaways. I don't want you to stress about that last page too much and try to influence those factors in any way. It's just going to do your head in. The body's going to do what it's going to do. We just need to focus on what we can control. And one of the best ways to do that is by trying to weigh yourself consistently. So same time, same conditions. So preferably before food, in the morning, before you have something to drink, after using the toilet, if you're someone who goes to the toilet in the morning. Same clothes. So often I'll get someone send me a photo of them or the number on the scale that they're weighing in, and they got shoes on. How can you possibly have an accurate reading on the scale if you're changing your clothes from day to day and you're weighing in different clothes? So we need to try and make sure that the times that we do weigh in, and when we do weigh in, that it is under as similar conditions as possible. So things like food, things like drinks. So if you say weigh in mid-morning every morning, but you have breakfast before, depending on what you have for breakfast or depending on how much you drink with breakfast, can very much influence the number that you see on the scale. So trying to standardize this as best you can will give you the most accurate results possible, which will ultimately guide your fat loss journey just so much better, and it's just going to reduce the amount of fluctuation that you see on a day-to-day basis. Another one is focusing on weekly averages rather than daily fluctuations, especially to make your decisions in a fat loss journey. Never should you make a decision based on a daily fluctuation. Say if you had a spike of a kilo, you just gained a kilo overnight, you should never react to that by wanting to increase a calorie deficit or doing something crazy with activity levels or something like that. Never change anything in your program just based on a daily fluctuation. We should make the decision based on weekly averages or even bi-weekly averages. Sometimes I even make decisions, particularly with females going through their menstrual cycle. I may even compare a week in their menstrual cycle to another week and see what's happening to the trend with those 2 weeks. So understanding that we want to look for long-term trends or even just sort of mid-term trends rather than the short-term day-to-day fluctuations. And that's how we want to base our decisions, or if we need to change anything, should be changed based on the weekly or bi-weekly or even monthly averages and the long-term data that we have. Another one is noting these dietary and hormonal and activity factors. Maybe you have started increasing your fiber intake. Maybe you've even started incorporating more carbohydrates into your diet. You need to note down these things because you're going to see this change in weight and may freak people out, but just understanding, oh no, like I've increased my fiber intake, so this makes sense. I had more water yesterday, that makes sense. Having that understanding is going to allow you to have a little bit more of a logical mindset when you see these spikes in weight. So instead of you getting emotional and reacting emotionally to these spikes, which is inevitably going to happen, even if you do everything perfectly, you're going to see spikes in weight from time to time, but having that understanding is going to allow you to look at it from a logical standpoint. And also a really good thing that I constantly tell my clients about, especially if they've seen that they've gained a kilo overnight, is that it has nothing to do with whether you're losing fat or gaining fat. For you to be able to gain a kilo of fat, you have to be eating in a surplus of over your maintenance of 7,700 calories. So if your maintenance is above 2,000, you need to eat 10,000 calories in that day before to see a kilo of fat gain. And no one just accidentally eats 10,000 calories. So having that understanding, again, can allow you to look at it from a little bit more of a logical standpoint and know that the number that you're seeing on the scale is more representative of what's happening to your fluid, whether you train the day before, what point you are in your menstrual cycle. Being patient is a massive one. As I spoke about before, we want to see long-term trends. You're never going to see a fat loss phase where you just lose weight consecutively each and every day until you get to your goal weight and then tick, you're done. Never happens like that. I've coached hundreds of people. Always, you're going to see ups and downs, plateaus with deep drop-offs, high peaks, little changes all the time. You're never going to see a linear fat loss phase. You're always going to see these ups and downs or plateaus to big drops. But what we do want to see is when we see these ups and downs, we want to see them in a downward trajectory. So we want to see a little bit of a trend where they're going down, even though it's up and down on a day-to-day basis. We want to see the overall going down. And a great way to do that is look at weekly average, bi-weekly average, to understand and see if that average number is actually going down. Now, some final thoughts to this. Weight fluctuation is completely normal. As I said, even if you do everything perfect, you are still going to see fluctuations on a day-to-day basis. Just accept it and make sure that you are looking at it from a logical standpoint. Don't let emotions control your responses. You need to remember that if you do see a kilo increase overnight, it's probably not because you ate 10,000 calories by accident yesterday and that's caused you to gain a kilo of fat. It's probably more to do with the daily fluctuations and the factors that we spoke about before. Long-term trends matter more than daily fluctuations. Just staying consistent and trusting the process. Don't want to get too deep into the first page I talk about and trying to influence those factors. Just making sure that you're in a calorie deficit, making sure that you have eating a high protein diet, making sure you're resistance training, making sure that you're standardizing your steps and getting a similar sort of activity levels per day, sleeping as best you can and trying to minimize stress, and you will see the results that you desire. As long as you do that consistently enough, just trust that process, your results will come. As always, guys, do those good things, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment if you want me to discuss anything in these videos. These videos are for you. So if you want anything discussed, chuck them in the comments below and I'll make sure that I make a video about it. But until next time, I'll see you in the next video, guys.